The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting their sickly greenish glow across the linoleum floor of Pete's Grocery on the corner of 5th and Madison. Elena Martinez had worked the night shift for 3 years now, ever since Miguel was born, ever since everything fell apart with David. The store smelled like floor cleaner and overripe bananas, a scent that had worked its way into her clothes, her hair, her skin. She couldn't escape it anymore. It was nearly midnight, and the store was empty, except for the occasional drunk stumbling in for cigarettes or chips. Elena stood behind the counter, her feet aching in the cheap sneakers she'd bought at the discount store 2 weeks ago. The baby monitor on the shelf beneath the register crackled softly. Mrs. Chen from upstairs was watching Miguel tonight, like she did most nights, refusing payment but accepting the occasional groceries Elena slipped into her hands. Elena's gratitude was a weight she carried everywhere. The door chimed, and she looked up from the magazine she wasn't really reading. 3 men walked in, and the air in the store changed immediately. The first 2 were large, solid, moving with the kind of precision that suggested military training or something worse. They wore dark suits despite the late hour, and their eyes swept the store with professional efficiency. But it was the third man who made Elena's breath catch in her throat. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on classical statues in museums. His suit probably cost more than her car, what was left of it anyway. He moved with absolute confidence, the kind that came from never being told no, from never needing to hear it. His eyes found her immediately, and she felt pinned by that gaze, dark and assessing, and somehow both cold and warm at once. They moved through the aisles, and Elena tried to look back down at her magazine, tried to pretend her heart wasn't hammering against her ribs. She'd seen men like this before. Not here, not in Pete's Grocery at midnight, but she knew the type. David had worked for men like this before everything went wrong, before she'd grabbed Miguel and run with nothing but a duffel bag and $300 in cash. The security camera in the corner had stopped working 6 months ago, and Pete had never bothered to fix it. Suddenly, that felt significant. The 2 bodyguards, because that's clearly what they were, positioned themselves near the door and the back of the store. The third man, the one who commanded the space just by being in it, moved through the aisles with purpose. Elena watched him from the corner of her eye, watched him pick up a can of formula, turn it over, read the label. He grabbed 3 more cans, then came to the counter. Up close, he was even more striking. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow, and his jaw was sharp enough to cut glass. He smelled like expensive cologne and something darker, something that made her think of leather and whiskey and danger. When he set the cans on the counter, she noticed his hands, broad and capable, with a gold ring on his right hand that caught the fluorescent light. Elena picked up the first can, scanned it. The beep seemed too loud in the quiet store. She picked up the second can, scanned it, and then stopped. The expiration date on the label was 3 days ago. She checked the third can. Same. The fourth. Same. Her stomach dropped. "I can't sell you these," she said, her voice quieter than she'd intended. He tilted his head slightly, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Interest, maybe, or surprise. "Excuse me?" Elena swallowed hard. She could feel the 2 bodyguards looking at her now, could feel the weight of their attention like a physical thing. "They're expired. 3 days past. I can't sell expired baby formula. It's against store policy, and it's dangerous. Babies have sensitive systems." The silence stretched between them. One of the bodyguards shifted his weight, and Elena heard the soft creak of leather, maybe a shoulder holster. Her fingers tightened on the can she was holding. "You can't sell them," the man repeated, and his voice was like smoke, dark and smooth and curling around her. There was no threat in it, not exactly, but there was power, authority, the kind of voice that expected compliance. "No, sir, I can't." Elena set the can down and met his eyes. This was stupid. This was so stupid. She should just sell him the formula and let whatever happened happen. But she thought of Miguel, sleeping upstairs, his tiny face peaceful in his crib. She thought of some other baby, some other mother's child, getting sick from expired formula. "There's fresh stock in the back. I can get you some. It'll just take a minute." The man stared at her for a long moment. She could see him processing this unexpected resistance from a tired grocery store clerk at midnight. His eyes moved over her face, taking in details she was suddenly conscious of: the dark circles under her eyes, the small scar on her chin from where David had shoved her into the kitchen counter, the cheap uniform shirt with Pete's Grocery embroidered on the pocket. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elena." She regretted it immediately. "Never give them anything," David used to say. "Any information is a weapon." "Elena." He said it like he was tasting it, rolling it around in his mouth. "I need that formula tonight. I'll pay double." "It's not about the money," Elena said, and she heard the exhaustion in her own voice. "I could lose my job if I sell expired products, and more than that, it's not safe. I wouldn't sell them to anyone." Something shifted in his expression. The hardness around his eyes softened fractionally, and he looked at her with what might have been respect. Or curiosity. She couldn't tell. "Wait here," he said, and then he turned and walked out of the store, the two bodyguards following like shadows. Elena stood, behind the counter, her hands shaking now that they were gone. She'd just refused a man who probably controlled half the neighborhood. A man with bodyguards and expensive suits and eyes that had seen things she didn't want to imagine. She thought about calling Pete, but what would she say? She thought about locking the door, but her shift didn't end for another 6 hours. She thought about running, but she always thought about running, and there was never anywhere to go. 20 minutes passed. The store remained empty. Elena restocked the candy bars, wiped down the counter, checked the baby monitor 3 times. Miguel slept on, unaware that his mother had probably just made the biggest mistake of her life. Then the door chimed again. This time, there were 7 of them. The man in the expensive suit led the way, and behind him came the 2 bodyguards plus 4 more men, all dressed in similar dark suits, all moving with that same predatory grace. Elena's breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was how it ended. She thought of Miguel upstairs, thought of Mrs. Chen trying to explain to the police what had happened, but the man just smiled at her, a real smile that transformed his face into something almost boyish, and said, "Show me this backstock." Elena blinked. "What?" "The fresh formula, in the back. Show me." He gestured toward the storage area behind the counter. She moved slowly, every muscle tense, expecting a hand on her arm, expecting violence. But they just followed her, this small army of dangerous men in expensive suits, into the cramped back room where Pete kept the overflow stock. The room smelled like cardboard and dust. Elena pulled the chain for the single overhead bulb, and weak yellow light flooded the space. She found the formula on the 3rd shelf, newer stock that Pete must have received last week. She pulled down a can, checked the date. 6 months until expiration. She turned, holding it out, and found the man right behind her, closer than she'd expected. She could see the fine weave of his shirt, could see the slight shadow of stubble on his jaw. "This one's good," she said, hating how her voice shook. "And there are more. As many as you need?" He took the can from her hands, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment. His skin was warm, and she felt an electric shock run up her arm. He studied the label, then looked at her. "You were right," he said. "The others were expired. 3 days past." "I know," Elena said, "and you refused to sell them to me." "Yes." "Even though I offered you double." "Yes." He smiled again, and this time it reached his eyes. "When I was a boy, my sister had a baby. Beautiful little girl, my niece. She got sick from bad formula, spent 2 weeks in the hospital. She's fine now, but for those 2 weeks..." He trailed off, and Elena saw something raw and real flash across his face before he locked it away again. "We almost lost her." Elena didn't know what to say. This, Man, this obviously dangerous man, was telling her about his niece, about fear and hospitals, and nearly losing someone. How much formula do you need? She asked instead. All of it, he said. Every can you have that's safe. And I'm buying this entire stock of expired ones too. I'm taking them off the shelves so no one else can buy them either. Elena nodded slowly. She helped him and his men load up a cart with all the fresh formula, 37 cans in total. Then they filled another cart with the expired stock from the shelves. The whole operation took 20 minutes, and through it all, the man watched her, studied her like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. At the counter, she rang everything up. The total was staggering. He pulled out a wallet, extracted a black credit card, and handed it to her. "What's your name?" she asked, then immediately regretted it. Never ask questions. David's voice again, always there, always warning her. "Dante," he said. "Dante Russo." The name meant nothing to her, but she saw one of the bodyguards shift slightly, saw the way they all seemed to stand a little straighter. It meant something to them. "Thank you for this," Dante said as she processed the payment, "for not selling me something that could have hurt someone I care about." "I was just doing my job," Elena said. "No," he replied, taking the receipt from her. "You were doing more than your job. Most people would have just sold me what I asked for and collected the money. You stood up to me, to us." He gestured at the men around him. "That takes courage." Elna felt her face flush. She didn't feel courageous. She felt terrified and exhausted, and like she might fall apart at any second. Dante pulled out his wallet again and extracted a business card, crisp and white, with just a name and phone number in elegant black script. He set it on the counter between them. "If you ever need anything," he said. "Anything at all. You call that number." "I don't need anything," Elena said automatically. His eyes held hers for a long moment. "Everyone needs something," he said quietly. "And something tells me you need more than most." Then they were gone, loading the carts into 2 black SUVs parked outside, and the store was empty again. Just Elena and the humming fluorescent lights and the smell of floor cleaner and bananas. She picked up the business card, felt the expensive weight of the cardstock, and tucked it into her pocket without knowing why. The rest of the night passed in a blur. 2 more customers, both regulars, both easy. At 6 a.m., the morning shift clerk came in, a kid named Tommy who was always hungover and always late. Elena clocked out, grabbed her jacket, and climbed the stairs to Mrs. Chen's apartment. Miguel was awake, sitting in his high chair and making a mess with the oatmeal Mrs. Chen had given him. When he saw Elena, his whole face lit up, and he reached for her with sticky hands. She picked him up, held him, close, breathed in the clean baby smell of him. "You look tired, honey," Mrs. Chen said, pouring Elena a cup of coffee without asking. "Long night," Elena said. She didn't mention the men in suits. She didn't mention Dante Russo. She just held her son and drank her coffee and tried not to think about the business card in her pocket, already starting to feel worn at the edges where her fingers had traced it all night. 3 days passed. Elena worked her shifts, came home to Miguel, slept in fragments. The business card stayed in her pocket, transferred from one pair of jeans to another. She didn't know why she kept it. She told herself she'd throw it away, but she never did. On the 4th day, David found her. She was walking home from Pete's, Miguel on her hip, a bag of groceries in her other hand. It was early afternoon, the sun bright and harsh, making her squint after the dim store. She was thinking about nothing in particular, just putting one foot in front of the other, when a hand grabbed her arm. She spun, and there he was. David. 3 years, and he still looked the same. Handsome in that slick way that had fooled her when she was 19, with his styled hair and his expensive watch and his smile that never reached his eyes. Except now he looked thinner, harder, with new lines around his mouth that spoke of anger and maybe something worse. "Elena," he said, and his voice was syrup with poison underneath. "Baby, I've been looking everywhere for you. Miguel started to cry, sensing her tension, and Elena took a step back, but David's hand tightened on her arm. Let go, she said, and she heard the fear in her voice, hated herself for it. We need to talk, David said, about our son, about you leaving, about the money you took. I took $300. That was mine. Everything of yours is mine, David said. And there it was, the thing that had made her run in the first place. The possessiveness that had started as flattery and ended as a cage. A man walking his dog crossed the street, and David let go of her arm, but he didn't step back. I'm staying at the Riverside Hotel, he said. Room 412. You're going to come see me tonight, and we're going to talk about you coming home. I'm not coming home, Elena said. I'm never coming home. David's face darkened. You don't have a choice. I know where you work now. I know where you live. I know that old Chinese lady watches our son. It would be a shame if something happened that made that arrangement impossible. Elena felt ice flood her veins. Don't you dare threaten Mrs. Chen. Then come see me tonight, David said. Come alone. We'll talk. That's all. Just talk. He walked away, and Elena stood there on the sidewalk, shaking so hard she thought she might drop Miguel or the groceries or both. She made it back to her apartment, locked the door, put Miguel in his playpen. Then she sat on the floor of her tiny bathroom and cried as quietly as she could, one hand pressed to her mouth to muffle the sound. She couldn't go see David. She knew what talk meant. It meant him convincing her, manipulating her, wearing her down until she agreed to go back. And if she didn't agree, it meant something worse. It meant force. It meant Miguel being taken away. It meant the kind of violence David had always been capable of, but had only shown her glimpses of before she left. But if she didn't go, he'd make good on his threats. Mrs. Chen was 74 and didn't need trouble. Pete would fire her if there was any drama at the store. She had nowhere to go, no money for a lawyer, no family to run to. She pulled out her phone, stared at it. She could call the police, but what would she say? He grabbed my arm. He threatened me vaguely. She had no restraining order, no proof of past abuse, nothing but her word against his. And David was charming. David was convincing. David knew exactly what to say to make himself look like the concerned father, and her look like the unstable mother who'd kidnapped his child. Her hand moved to her pocket, pulled out the business card that had lived there for 3 days now. Dante Russo, a phone number. Everyone needs something. And something tells me you need more than most. She didn't know anything about him, except that he traveled with bodyguards and bought out stores worth of baby formula and had a niece who'd once been sick. She didn't know if calling him would make things better or infinitely worse, but she was out of options, out of time, out of everything except fear and desperation. Elena dialed the number. It rang once, twice. On the third ring, a woman answered. Russo residence. I need to speak to Dante Russo, Elena said. My name is Elena Martinez. He gave me this number. One moment, please. Silence. Elena could hear Miguel babbling to himself in the other room. She could hear Mrs. Chen's television through the ceiling, some daytime talk show. She could hear her own heart hammering in her chest. Then a different voice, male, deep, familiar, even though she'd only heard it once before. Elena, are you all right? The concern in his voice, immediate and genuine, nearly undid her. She swallowed hard. I'm sorry to call. I didn't know who else. I need help. Where are you? She told him her address, hating how small her voice sounded, how broken. Stay there, Dante said. Lock your door. Don't open it for anyone. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He was there in 15. Elena watched from her window as the black SUV pulled up, the same one from the grocery store. Dante got out first, dressed more casually now in dark jeans and a fitted black shirt, but still commanding the space around him. 2 bodyguards followed. They looked up at her building, and she stepped back from the window, suddenly conscious of the peeling paint, the cracked concrete steps, the poverty of the whole place. The knock came, firm but not aggressive. Elena checked the peephole, saw Dante standing there alone, his bodyguards positioned further back. She opened the door with the chain still on. "It's me," he said unnecessarily. She closed the door, unhooked the chain, opened it again. Dante stepped inside, and her tiny apartment seemed to shrink around him. Miguel looked up from his playpen, wide-eyed at this stranger, and made a questioning sound. "You have a son," Dante said, and something in his voice had gentled. "Miguel, he's almost 3. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold together. "I shouldn't have called. This isn't your problem." "Tell me what happened," Dante said. So she did. She told him about David, about the 3 years of escalating control and jealousy and violence that she'd hidden from everyone. She told him about running, about Pete's grocery and the night shift, and trying to build something safe. She told him about the sidewalk that afternoon, about the threats, about the hotel room, and the impossible choice. Dante listened without interrupting, his dark eyes fixed on her face, his expression growing harder with every detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You're not going to that hotel," he finally said. "I don't have a choice. If I don't—" "You're not going," he repeated, and there was steel in his voice now. "I'll handle this. You don't understand. David, he's not just going to go away because—" "Elena." Dante moved closer, and she could see the scar through his eyebrow again, could see the absolute certainty in his eyes. "I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to be honest with me. Do you want this man out of your life permanently?" She thought of Miguel growing up seeing David hurt her. She thought of always looking over her shoulder, always waiting for him to find them again. She thought of the fear that had become so constant, she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. "Yes," she whispered. "Then trust me," Dante said. "Just for tonight. Trust me to handle this." Elena didn't know why she believed him. Maybe because he'd listened to her about expired baby formula. Maybe because he'd told her about his niece. Maybe because she was desperate and drowning and he was offering her a lifeline. Maybe because when he looked at her, she didn't feel invisible anymore. "Okay," she said. Dante pulled out his phone, made a call. "Marco, I need you to find someone. David." He looked at Elena. "Henderson," she supplied. "David Henderson, staying at the Riverside Hotel, room 412. I need everything you can find on him, everything, and I need it in an hour." He listened for a moment. "No, this one's personal." He hung up. "What are you going to do?" Elena asked. "First, I'm going to make sure you and Miguel are safe," Dante said. "Then I'm going to have a conversation with David Henderson." "He won't listen. He never listens. He thinks he has power over you," Dante interrupted. "And maybe he did. But now he's going to learn what real power looks like." Elena felt a chill run through her, but it wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was something darker, something that felt almost like hope. Dante made another call, and 30 minutes later, there was another knock on the door. This time it was a woman, maybe 50, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. Dante introduced her as Teresa, his head of household security. "Teresa is going to stay here with you and Miguel tonight," Dante explained. "No one gets past her. No one. You're safe." Teresa smiled at Elena, then immediately engaged Miguel with a toy from her bag, some kind of soft stuffed bear. Miguel, who was usually shy with strangers, took to her immediately. "I should be back before midnight," Dante said to Elena. "But if anything happens, if you need anything, Teresa knows how to reach me." "What are you going to do to him?" Elena asked again. Dante looked at her for a long moment. "What needs to be done?" he said finally. "Nothing more. Nothing less." He left, and Elena sank onto her couch, watching Teresa play with Miguel like this was the most normal thing in the world. Like dangerous men didn't have conversations in hotel rooms, like her whole life wasn't balanced on a knife's edge. The hours crawled by. Teresa ordered takeout around 7, Italian food from a place Elena had never heard of, and it was better than anything she'd eaten in years. Miguel ate pasta with his hands and laughed when Teresa made funny faces at him. Elena picked at her food, her stomach too tight with anxiety to manage more than a few bites. At 10:30, her phone rang. Dante. "It's handled," he said. Elena gripped the phone so hard her knuckles went white. "What does that mean?" "It means David Henderson won't bother you again. Ever." There was something dark in his voice, something final. "He's leaving town tonight. He has no claim to Miguel, and he knows that if he ever comes near you again, there will be consequences he can't afford." "How did you—" "It's better if you don't know the details," Dante said. "But he's gone, Elena. He's really gone." She started to cry, couldn't help it, great gasping sobs that she tried to muffle with her hand. Teresa took the phone from her, spoke quietly to Dante, then hung up. "He's coming here," Teresa said gently. "He wants to make sure you're okay." Dante arrived 20 minutes later. He looked the same as when he'd left, not a hair out of place, but Elena thought she could see something in his eyes, something heavy and tired. He dismissed Teresa with a nod, and she left, closing the door quietly behind her. Miguel had fallen asleep on the couch, and Elena had covered him with a blanket. Dante looked at him, and his expression softened in a way that made Elena's chest ache. "Thank you," she said. The words felt completely inadequate. "You don't need to thank me," Dante said. "I told you if you needed anything." "I know, but I never expected. I didn't think—" She trailed off, not knowing how to articulate what she felt. Relief, gratitude, confusion. Fear still, but a different kind now. And something else, something she couldn't quite name. "How did you end up here?" Dante asked. "Working nights at Pete's Grocery." Elena laughed, a broken sound. "The usual way. I was young and stupid and thought I was in love. David was charming at first, attentive. I got pregnant, and he seemed happy about it. But after Miguel was born, everything changed. Or maybe it didn't change. Maybe he was always like that, and I just couldn't see it." "It's not your fault," Dante said. "Men like that, they're good at hiding what they are until you're trapped." "How do you know about men like that?" He smiled. A sad, twisted thing. "Because I've been one. Not with women, but in other ways. I've made people afraid. I've used power to get what I want. I'm not a good man, Elena. You should know that." "You saved me tonight," she said. "Maybe. Or maybe I just moved you from one dangerous situation to another." He ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time, he looked uncertain. "You should stay away from me. I'm offering because it's the right thing to do, but you should refuse." "What are you offering?" "Protection, real protection. A place to live where David or anyone else can't find you. A better job if you want it, or the freedom to not work and just focus on your son. Whatever you need to build a real life." Elena stared at him. "Why? Why would you do that?" "Because you stood up to me over baby formula," Dante said. "Because you put what was right over what was safe. Because I have more money and power than I know what to do with, and for once I'd like to use it for something good." "I don't need charity," Elena said, even as part of her screamed that, yes, she did. She needed anything and everything he was offering. "It's not charity," Dante said. "It's repayment. You did something for me without knowing who I was or what I could do for you. You did it because it was right. Let me do this because it's right." Elena looked at Miguel, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. She thought about the night shift at Pete's, the constant fear, the exhaustion that had become her baseline. She thought about trying to give her son a better life and failing with every minimum wage paycheck. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Dante's whole body relaxed, and she realized he'd been tense, waiting for her answer. I have a property in the suburbs, a house. It's empty right now. You and Miguel can stay there. It's yours for as long as you want it. I can't just move into a stranger's house. Then get to know me, Dante said. I'm not asking for anything. No strings, no expectations. Just a safe place for you and your son. Elena knew she should say no. Knew this was crazy, accepting help from a man who'd admitted he wasn't good, who had the kind of power that could make David Henderson disappear in an afternoon. But she was so tired of fighting and running and barely surviving. And when Dante looked at her, she didn't see pity. She saw respect, recognition, like he understood what it cost to keep going when everything in you wanted to stop. Why do you travel with bodyguards? She asked suddenly. Dante smiled. Because there are people who'd like to hurt me. I run certain businesses that operate in gray areas of the law. I have enemies. Are you in the Mafia? That's a complicated question with a complicated answer. But yes, essentially. And you're offering to let me and my son live in a house you own, with all that danger around you? The house is removed from my business. No one knows I own it except my most trusted people. You'd be safer there than you are here. He paused. But you're right to be cautious. Think about it. Take your time. I'll have Teresa stay tonight regardless. No, Elena said, and she was surprised by the firmness in her own voice. I don't need time. I've already decided. We'll go. Something flickered across Dante's face, too quick for her to read. All right. I'll have everything arranged by tomorrow. You can move in this weekend. He stood to leave, and Elena stood too, suddenly not wanting him to go. Dante, why do you really want to help me? And don't say it's because of the formula. He looked at her for a long moment, and in the dim light of her apartment, he looked younger somehow, more vulnerable. Because when I look at you, I see someone fighting to survive with dignity intact. And that's rare. That's precious. I want to protect that. Maybe because I lost my own a long time ago. Then he was gone, and Elena was alone with her sleeping son, and a future that had suddenly shifted from impossible to uncertain to something that might, against all odds, be okay. The house was nothing like Elena had imagined. She'd pictured something sterile and impersonal, a safe house with empty rooms and no character. Instead, Dante pulled up to a charming two-story colonial with pale blue shutters and a porch swing and flowers already blooming in the garden boxes. It was in a quiet neighborhood 30 minutes outside the city, where kids rode bikes in the street and neighbors waved to each other and nothing felt dangerous. This is yours? Elena asked, Miguel heavy on her hip as she stared at the house. I bought it 5 years ago, Dante said, carrying her meager belongings, the single duffel bag that held everything she owned. I thought I might want a place away from the city, somewhere quiet, but I never stayed here. It seemed like a waste. Inside was even better, furnished beautifully with comfortable couches and a kitchen that made Elena want to cry because it had actual counter space and appliances that worked. There were 3 bedrooms upstairs, one of which had already been set up as a nursery with a crib and changing table and a rocking chair by the window. How did you? Elena started. I had people prepare it, Dante said. I hope I got everything right. If not, we can change it. We. Elena caught the word, turned it over in her mind. There was no we. This was him helping her. A temporary arrangement until she got on her feet. Nothing more. But then why did he keep coming back? That first week in the house, Dante showed up every evening after work. He brought groceries, though she insisted she could buy her own. He brought toys for Miguel, things that were too expensive and too thoughtful. He stayed for dinner, and they talked while Miguel played on the floor, talked about everything and nothing. Elena learned that Dante's parents had died when he was 16, that he'd raised his younger sister himself, that his niece was now 8 and his favorite person in the world. She learned that he loved old movies and hated coffee, but drank it anyway, and had a scar on his ribs from a knife fight when he was 20. She told him about growing up in foster care, about never having a real family, about meeting David when she was working at a diner and thinking he was her ticket to something better. She told him about the first time David hit her, how she'd made excuses, how it had gotten worse so gradually she'd barely noticed until one day she was afraid to speak without permission. "I should have left sooner," she said one night, when Miguel was asleep upstairs, and she and Dante were sitting on the porch swing, the night air soft and cool around them. "You left when you could," Dante said. "That's what matters." "I stayed for 3 years. 3 years of his bullshit because I was too scared to go." "Fear isn't weakness," Dante said. "Fear is your brain trying to keep you alive. You survived, Elena. That's not nothing." She looked at him, this man who'd crashed into her life 2 weeks ago and turned everything upside down. In the dim porch light, he looked softer somehow, less intimidating. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, showing strong forearms, and he'd taken off his jacket somewhere during dinner. He looked almost normal, if you ignored the expensive watch and the black SUV in the driveway, with bodyguards waiting inside it. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Really here, every night. You don't have to do this." Dante was quiet for a moment, staring out at the street where fireflies were just starting to blink in the growing darkness. "I like being here," he said finally. "With you, with Miguel. It feels normal. I don't get a lot of normal in my life." "Your life isn't normal because you choose for it not to be," Elena pointed out. "You could do something else. Anything else." "Could I?" He turned to look at her. "I've been in this world since I was 16. It's all I know. How to make money, how to keep power, how to protect what's mine. I'm good at it. But sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just be someone else." "Who would you be?" Elena asked. Dante smiled. "I don't. No, maybe a guy who works a regular job and comes home to a house like this, who has family dinners and helps with homework and doesn't need bodyguards to buy baby formula at midnight." "That guy sounds boring," Elena said, and was rewarded with Dante's laugh, a real one that made her chest feel warm. "Maybe," he agreed, "but he sounds happy." Their eyes met, and Elena felt that electric shock again, the one she'd felt in the back room of Pete's grocery when his fingers had brushed hers. The air between them seemed to thicken, and she was suddenly intensely aware of how close he was sitting, how she could smell his cologne, how his arm was resting on the back of the swing just behind her shoulders. "I should go," Dante said, but he didn't move. "Okay," Elena said, but she didn't want him to. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek, and Elena felt her breath catch. This was dangerous. This was stupid. She'd just escaped one complicated man, and here she was, falling for another one who was even more dangerous in entirely different ways. But God, she wanted him to kiss her, wanted it with an intensity that scared her. Dante seemed to read her mind, because he leaned in fractionally, his eyes dark and intense. "Tell me to leave," he said, his voice rough. "Tell me this is a bad idea." "It is a bad idea," Elena whispered. "You should leave." "But you don't want me to." "No." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious that might break. Elena made a sound low in her throat and kissed him back, her hands coming up to grip his shirt. He tasted like the wine they'd had with dinner, and something uniquely him. And when he pulled her closer, she went willingly, wanting to be as close as possible. They broke apart finally, both breathing hard, and Dante rested his forehead against hers. "I told myself I wouldn't do this," he said. "Told myself you needed space and time, and I was just here to help." "I don't want space," Elena said. "I don't want time. I want you." "You don't know what you're asking for," Dante said, but his hand was tangled in her hair, and he didn't let go. My life is complicated, dangerous. People I care about get hurt. Then don't care about me, Elena said, knowing it was already too late, knowing he already did just as she already cared about him. Too late for that, Dante said, echoing her thoughts. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Elena let herself fall into it, let herself forget about complications and danger and everything except this moment, this feeling, this man who'd saved her and stayed and somehow made her feel like she was worth saving. The weeks that followed settled into a routine that felt almost domestic. Dante came every evening, sometimes staying for just an hour, sometimes staying until midnight. He brought his sister and niece to meet Elena and Miguel, and Elena watched him transform around the little girl, becoming silly and playful in a way that made her heart ache. His sister, Sophia, was warm and welcoming, treating Elena like they'd been friends for years instead of strangers. "He's different with you," Sophia told Elena one afternoon when they were alone in the kitchen while the kids played in the living room. "Lighter. He smiles more. He probably just likes having a place to relax," Elena said, uncomfortable with the implication. "No," Sophia said firmly. "It's you. I've never seen him like this. Please don't hurt him." Elena almost laughed at that. Hurt him? How could she possibly hurt a man like Dante Russo? But then she saw the genuine concern in Sophia's eyes and realized that beneath all the power and money and danger, Dante was just a man who could be hurt like anyone else. "I won't," Elena promised, hoping it was a promise she could keep. But complications were inevitable. One evening, Dante arrived later than usual, and when Elena opened the door, she immediately knew something was wrong. His face was tight, his movements careful in a way that suggested pain. "What happened?" she demanded. "Nothing, just a long day." He moved past her into the house, but she saw him wince. "Dante," she caught his arm. "What happened?" "There was a disagreement. It got physical. I'm fine." "Let me see." "Elena, let me see," she repeated, and after a moment, he sighed and lifted his shirt. The bruises were already forming across his ribs, dark purple and angry. Elena sucked in a breath. "You need to go to the hospital." "I've had worse. Nothing's broken." "You don't know that." "I know my own body," Dante said. He pulled his shirt back down and looked at her. "This is what I was talking about. This is the reality of my life. People want to hurt me. Sometimes they succeed." Elena stared at him, at this man who'd been hurt defending whatever empire he'd built, and felt fear and anger, and something fiercer than both. "Sit down," she said. "I'll get ice." She tended to him carefully, pressing ice wrapped in a towel to his ribs, while he sat on the couch and tried not to show how much it hurt. Miguel had already gone to bed, and the house was quiet around them. "Who did this?" Elena asked. "It doesn't matter." "It does to me." Dante looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. "Why?" "Because I care about you," Elena said simply, "and I don't like that someone hurt you." "People hurt each other all the time in my world," Dante said. "It's part of the game." "Then stop playing," Elena said. "Get out. Do something else. It's not that simple. I have responsibilities. People who depend on me. Businesses that would fall apart if I just walked away." "Or would they?" Elena challenged. "Or are you just telling yourself that because it's easier than admitting you could leave if you really wanted to?" Dante was quiet for a long time, his hand coming up to cover hers where she was, still pressing the ice to his ribs. "Maybe," he said finally. "Maybe I am." That night he stayed. Not in her bed, though she could see he wanted to cross that final line between what they were and what they could be. Instead, he fell asleep on the couch, and Elena covered him with a blanket and stood looking down at him for a long moment. In sleep, his face was peaceful, younger, without the weight of power and danger that he carried when he was awake. She was falling in love with him, had probably already fallen, That first night when he'd looked at her expired formula and told her about his niece. It was reckless and stupid, and everything she shouldn't do. But when had her heart ever listened to reason? The next morning, Dante was gone before she woke up, but there was a note on the kitchen counter in elegant handwriting. "Thank you for taking care of me. I'm not used to it." Elena traced the words with her finger, feeling something warm bloom in her chest. That evening, he came back with flowers. Actual flowers. A bouquet of roses and lilies that smelled like summer. "I'm sorry for worrying you last night," he said. "Are you okay?" Elena asked, taking the flowers, trying not to read too much into the gesture. "I'm fine. Bruised but functional." He smiled at her, and it was the real smile, the one that transformed his face. "I was thinking, there's a benefit dinner next week for a children's hospital. I'm expected to attend. Would you come with me?" Elena stared at him. "Like a date?" "Like a date," Dante confirmed. "I want to take you somewhere, show you off. Be with you publicly instead of just hiding away here." "I don't have anything to wear to a benefit dinner," Elena said, "and I'd need to find someone to watch Miguel." "Teresa would be happy to watch Miguel, and we'll find you something to wear. Say yes, Elena." She should say no, should keep this simple, keep it contained to this house and these quiet evenings. But she wanted to see his world, wanted to be part of his life outside these walls. "Yes," she said. "Okay. Yes." The dress Dante bought her cost more than she'd made in 3 months at Pete's grocery. It was deep emerald green, elegant and sophisticated, with a neckline that showed just enough to be interesting without being scandalous. When Elena looked at herself in the mirror the night of the benefit, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Dante arrived in a tuxedo, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine, and the way he looked at her made Elena's knees weak. "You're beautiful," he said simply. The benefit was at a 5-star hotel downtown, all chandeliers and champagne, and people who wore their wealth like armor. Elena felt out of place immediately, aware of the gaps in her education, the roughness of her past that no expensive dress could quite hide. But Dante kept his hand on the small of her back, steady and reassuring, and introduced her to everyone as if she belonged there as much as any of them. She met more of his world that night. The legitimate businessmen he partnered with, the politicians whose campaigns he funded, the socialites who ran charities and threw parties and wielded power in different but equally effective ways as their husbands. They all treated Dante with a mix of respect and wariness, and Elena understood that everyone here knew exactly who he was and what he did. They just didn't talk about it. "You're different here," Elena said when they were alone for a moment. Standing at the edge of the ballroom with champagne glasses, they weren't really drinking. "How so?" Dante asked. "Colder, more guarded, like you're wearing a mask." "I am wearing a mask," Dante said. "We all are here. It's part of the dance." He looked down at her. "Except with you. I don't have to wear it with you." Elena felt her heart squeeze. "Why me?" "Because you've seen what's underneath and didn't run," Dante said. "Because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be human." Before Elena could respond, a voice interrupted them. "Dante, it's been too long." Elena turned to see a man approaching, maybe Dante's age, handsome in a sharp, predatory way. Something about him made her skin crawl. "Vincent," Dante said, and his voice had gone flat, dangerous. "I didn't know you'd be here." "Charity is important to me," Vincent said, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. His gaze slid to Elena. "And who is this lovely creature?" "Elena," Dante said, not offering more. "Elena," Vincent repeated, taking her hand and kissing it in a gesture that felt mocking. "Charming. I hope Dante is treating you well. He has a tendency to collect beautiful things and forget they're fragile." "I'm not fragile," Elena said, pulling her hand back. Vincent laughed. "Even better. Dante always did prefer his women with spirit." He looked back at Dante. "We should talk, soon." There are matters that need discussing. There's nothing to discuss, Dante said. Oh, I think there is, but not here, not now. Vincent's smile sharpened. Enjoy your evening. He walked away, and Elena felt Dante's whole body tense beside her. Who was that? Someone I used to work with. We had a falling out. Dante's jaw was tight. He's dangerous, Elena. Stay away from him. I wasn't planning on befriending him, Elena said. He gave me the creeps. The rest of the evening was strained. Dante was distracted, his eyes constantly scanning the room, watching for threats. They left early, and in the car ride home, he was quiet, staring out the window. Talk to me, Elena said finally. Vincent is going to be a problem, Dante said. He's been trying to move into my territory for months. Seeing you with me tonight, he'll view you as a weakness he can exploit. Fear curled in Elena's stomach. What does that mean? It means I need to be more careful. It means you need to be more careful. He looked at her, and his eyes were tortured. It means maybe I was wrong to bring you into my life. Maybe I'm just putting you in danger all over again. Don't do that, Elena said. Don't decide for me what risks I can take. I choose to be with you. I choose this, knowing who you are and what your life is like. You don't know, Dante said. You don't know what men like Vincent are capable of. Then tell me. So he did. He told her about the violence, the betrayals, the way his world operated on threat and counter-threat. He told her about people who'd crossed him and disappeared, about enemies who'd sent messages written in blood. He told her about the constant vigilance, the paranoia that was justified, the weight of power that never got lighter. And you want to stay in this? Elena asked when he was done. I want to be with you, Dante said, but I don't know how to do that and keep you safe. Maybe you can't, Elena said. Maybe life is just dangerous, and all we can do is choose who we want to face it with. They were parked outside her house now, the lights from inside warm and welcoming. Elena could see Teresa through the window, reading on the couch. Everything looked so normal, so safe, but she knew now that safety was an illusion. It had been an illusion with David. It was an illusion here. The only difference was that with Dante, she was choosing the danger with her eyes open. Come inside, she said. Stay tonight. Really stay. Dante looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, and they went inside together, dismissed Teresa, checked on Miguel sleeping peacefully in his crib. Then Elena led Dante to her bedroom, and this time when he kissed her, there was no hesitation, no holding back. They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies with the kind of attention that spoke of something deeper than just physical need. Afterward, Elena lay with her head on Dante's chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling safer than she had in years, despite knowing all the reasons she shouldn't. I love you, Dante said into the darkness. I didn't mean to. I tried not to, but I do. Elena felt tears slip down her cheeks. I love you too. I'm going to protect you, Dante said. Whatever it takes. Vincent won't touch you. No one will. It was a promise that Elena wanted to believe. But she'd learned the hard way that promises were fragile things that broke under pressure. Still, with Dante's arms around her and his heart beating steady beneath her ear, she let herself hope. 2 days later, Vincent made his move. Elena was at the grocery store with Miguel, just a normal afternoon errand, when 2 men approached her in the parking lot. They were professionals. She could tell that immediately. Not violent, not threatening, just there. Ms. Martinez, one of them said. Mr. Vincent would like to speak with you. I don't know any Mr. Vincent, Elena said, her hand tightening on Miguel's. We're not here to hurt you, the other man said. Just to deliver a message. Mr. Vincent knows all about you, about your son, about the house you're living in. He knows what you mean to Dante Russo, and he wants you to know that if Dante doesn't back off from the waterfront development, he'll be forced to take actions he'd prefer to avoid. Fear flooded through Elena, cold and sharp. Get away from me! We're just messengers, the first man said. Think about what we've said. Talk to Dante. Maybe you can make him see reason. They walked away, and Elena stood there shaking, Miguel starting to fuss because he could feel her distress. She got him in the car, drove home with one eye on the rearview mirror, and called Dante the second she was inside with the doors locked. He was there in 10 minutes, bodyguards sweeping the house and yard before he even came in. When he saw Elena, saw her face, he pulled her into his arms. What happened? She told him. Told him about the men, the message, the threat wrapped in polite words. Dante's face went cold in a way that was honestly terrifying. Pack a bag, he said. You and Miguel. You're staying at my place in the city until this is handled. Dante. This isn't negotiable, he said. Vincent has crossed a line. He touched you, threatened my son. He stopped, seemed to realize what he'd said. Threatened Miguel. But Elena had heard it. My son. The slip was revealing, showing how deeply Dante had already woven her and Miguel into his life, into his heart. What are you going to do? Elena asked. What I should have done months ago, Dante said. I'm going to end this. The penthouse Dante owned in the city was luxurious in a way that made the house seem modest. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire downtown, and the space was decorated with art that Elena suspected was original and priceless. But she barely noticed any of it. She was too focused on Dante, on the way he'd transformed from the man who brought her flowers to someone harder, colder, more dangerous than she'd seen before. Stay here, he told her. Don't leave for any reason. I have security on every exit. No one gets in or out without my knowing. Where are you going? To have a conversation with Vincent. He cupped her face in his hands. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Elena nodded, even though fear was eating her alive. Be careful. Always. He kissed her, deep and thorough, like he was memorizing her. Then he was gone. The hours that followed were the longest of Elena's life. She tried to keep busy, playing with Miguel, but every car horn made her jump, every siren made her heart race. Teresa stayed with her, calm and capable, but even she seemed tense. Finally, at nearly midnight, Dante came back. He looked exhausted, and there was blood on his shirt, though Elena couldn't tell if it was his or someone else's. When he saw her, something in his face cracked, and he crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. It's done, he said. Vincent won't be a problem anymore. What does that mean? Elena asked. It means he's leaving the city, permanently. He's dropping all claims to the waterfront development. He's staying away from me and everyone I care about. How did you convince him? You don't want to know? Dante said. You really don't want to know. But Elena thought she did know. She could see it in the blood on his shirt, in the hardness that hadn't quite left his eyes. Dante had done something terrible tonight. Maybe not killed Vincent, but close. Close enough. I should be horrified, she said quietly. I should want to run. But you're not. And you don't. No, Elena said, because he threatened my son, our son, and you protected him, protected us. However you had to. Our son, Dante repeated, and smiled for the first time since he'd come back. Say it again. Our son, Elena said, and kissed him, tasting blood and violence and love all mixed together. That night, with Miguel sleeping in the guest room and the city lights sparkling below, Dante asked Elena to marry him. There was no ring, no grand gesture, just the two of them standing by the window, and him saying, I want this to be permanent. I want you to be my family, officially. Will you marry me? Elena thought about all the reasons she should say no. The danger, the violence, the complicated morality of his world. But then she thought about how he'd saved her, how he'd protected Miguel, how he'd shown her what it felt like to be cherished and valued and loved. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. 3 months later, they were married in a small ceremony with just close family and friends. Elena wore a simple white dress, and Miguel was the ring bearer, taking his job very seriously, even though he was too young to understand what was happening. Sophia cried through the whole thing, and Dante's niece threw flower petals with enthusiastic abandon. When Dante kissed his bride, sealing the vows they'd just made, Elena felt like her whole life had led to this moment. All the pain, all the fear, all the struggle had been worth it to get here, to this man, to this family they were building together. They moved into a new house, something between the modest colonial and the downtown penthouse. Big enough for a family, secure enough to be safe, normal enough that Miguel could have friends over without anyone questioning anything. Dante started delegating more of his business, staying home more, being present in a way he'd never allowed himself before. Life wasn't perfect. There were still dangers, still complications. Dante still had enemies, still operated in moral gray areas that Elena tried not to think about too hard. But they had each other, and they had Miguel, and slowly they were building something real and lasting. One night, a year after the wedding, they were lying in bed, and Elena turned to Dante. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing this life with us instead of the freedom you had before?" Dante pulled her closer, kissed her forehead. "I chose freedom," he said. "Real freedom. The freedom to love you. The freedom to be a father to Miguel. The freedom to come home at night instead of constantly looking over my shoulder. This isn't a cage, Elena. This is the first time in my life I've been free." Elena smiled, closed her eyes, and let herself believe it. They'd both been trapped in different ways, both running from different things. But they'd found each other, and in finding each other, they'd found a way to be whole. Miguel started calling Dante Papa around that time, and every time he did, Elena watched her husband's face light up like someone had given him the greatest gift in the world. Maybe they had. Maybe that's what family was, the greatest gift you could give or receive. Years later, when Elena told the story of how they met, she always started with the formula. "He tried to buy expired baby formula," she'd say, "and I said no. Everything else just followed. From that." It was a simplification, of course. It left out all the complexity, all the danger, all the difficult choices and moral compromises. But it was also the truth. Everything had followed from that first moment, when a tired grocery store clerk had stood up to a powerful man, and he'd respected her for it instead of crushing her. They built a life on that foundation, on mutual respect and fierce protection and love that had been forged in fire and came out stronger for it. And if sometimes Elena woke in the night and wondered what would have happened if she'd just sold him the expired formula, just taken the easy path, she pushed the thought away. Because this was her life now. This was her family. This was her love. And she wouldn't trade it for anything.